Okay.
How
Welcome
are you today?
back. I'm good. Welcome back to Perth, Nippin.
Thank you,
Good to
thank
have
you.
you back. It's been nice to have you around for a few days.
I did 2 weeks in Canberra, and I'm so fortunate that on the way back we could meet and
Yeah.
spend some time together because I so enjoyed being with you last time.
It's not as nice as down on the block, but you know, it's an office. So
It's
there you
good,
go.
it's good. Greg,
Mm.
I think a lot of people have said, speak very highly of you for the kind of work you do, at least in my circle, in
Mm.
my little network. You've done a lot of good work around risk management and safety, particularly the last two books that you have produced. And I think it would be nice to know you a little bit before we get started with the book. At a very personal level, let's ask the question, who is Greg Smith?
Okay. You did warn me you were going to ask, so, and I did warn you that I'm not a sharer, but I'll do my best. So I'm born and bred in Western Australia. We grew up on a farm, um, and then went away to boarding school, as most people did back then in the 80s. You went away to boarding school. Went and got into university, and then got into law schools. I got the system was a bit different back then. But anyway, I got into law school, so I thought, oh well, I'll do law, and partially put myself through law school doing Army Reserve in Australia, which is like a part-time Army role. So that's context. And then I started practicing law, and back in the days when I started practicing law, you had to do a couple of years what was called an article clerkship, and then you got admitted to practice. The system's a little bit different nowadays. So I did my article clerkship, I got admitted to practice. I was working predominantly in commercial law. We had a rotation system through the firm that I started with, and I just wasn't enjoying it. Didn't suit me, so I actually left and went and joined the regular army, and did that for about 4 years. Then I came back, got invited back by one of the partners who I ran into at a restaurant one night, funnily enough. Got invited back, went and did that, came back to practice, and worked my way through legal practice for a while. Probably for another 15 years or so, maybe a bit more. Then I went and joined an oil and gas company in a operational safety role, because I've been talking about lots of, you couldn't study. So when I went to law school, there was no such thing as safety law. There was safety law, but it wasn't a thing. You just didn't do it. Didn't do employment law back then either, and funnily enough, they're the two practice areas I ended up in. But I got involved in lots of fatality inquiries when I came back out. I was actually involved in one in the army, and then I got involved in several when I was out of the army. And that just created a real interest in this area, particularly around this disconnect. And if you go back to paper safe, this disconnect between all these processes that we have and what actually happens in practice. It's such a long-standing issue. So went to the oil and gas thing, thinking, oh, I can go and learn a lot about how this works in practice. That was an eye-opening experience, because you go in there and you go, oh my God, this is all over the place. It's not well managed at all, was my impression. So I did that for a while, got out, went back to the law, went and set up my own practice with another fellow, did that for a while, then ran my own law practice and did a part-time role in a mining services company, and now I'm back practicing law. So that's kind of the sort of CV, I guess, for what that's worth. But I'm married, we've got 3 kids, got a block that you came to last time, which is nice, which we'd always wanted to get some land, particularly coming from a farm. It's just nice to have some space. We've got chickens now. I don't think we had chickens last time you were there.
Yes.
We've got our chickens. And so it's a bit odd where I find myself, because I kind of wanted to be a lawyer but almost fell into it. I didn't know that safety existed as a thing at all, really. Even when I was in the regular army for a while, safety certainly wasn't what you see it to be these days, which was fascinating for me. But I find my side of the safety fence quite different from what I hear from people in safety. And I don't want to sound really cold about this, but I know most people do safety, or lots of people do safety, out of this genuine concern to keep people from harm. But my exposure to safety has nearly always been the managers who are being prosecuted or blamed or having to deal with the aftermath, from how do I talk to the family. I mean, I still get questions, Greg, is it okay for me to go to the funeral? And I have no idea how to answer that question because I don't know the people or the relationships or anything like that. So you end up in this quasi-counselling role. But what's really driven my desire to interrogate safety management systems is the people who are expected to implement and oversee them. So we have a whole narrative built around the difficulty of the frontline workers to comply with them. But then there's this whole other subset of organisations who are accountable for the implementation of those and who are really held accountable if they don't work. So my perspective of safety is very much on trying to understand it from their view of the world.
There's so much to draw from, but you gave me so many moments to open up this conversation, Greg. What was that? You mentioned a couple of times it was an oh my God moment when you were still very new to this, and even once you were in the operational role, operational safety role. What were that oh my God moments which led you to believe that this is something I want to explore further?
I was just... So I had a boss immediately above me, and so I'd first arrived and I was this lawyer who specialised in the area, and I was seen as a bit novel around town, and I suppose. And he took me to a meeting with the CEO at the CEO's house. So it was one of those, very personal sort of come and meet the CEO, and these are all the connections. And I remember we're having this conversation, and I think I was doomed from the start with the organisation. Unfortunately, subtlety is tact, not my strong point. And my boss asked the CEO, and he said to the CEO, what keeps you awake at night? Because this was meant to be my learning part of the journey, I suppose. And he leaned forward and he had quite an accent, and he said to me, hand injuries. And I kind of leant back in my seat, and I probably wouldn't do this today, but I recall saying, are you serious? And both of them looked at me, and I said, aren't you concerned about these facilities blowing up and hundreds of people dying? Isn't that, and I got rushed out of the room reasonably quickly after that. And that's what really, and it still continues to strike me to this day, that this was an organisation that was investing millions of dollars in safety, not just in safety departments, but technical safety and risk and assurance and oversight and all of those sorts of things. And the idea that the person who's sitting at the top of that organisation will be concerned about hand injuries are important. I'm not minimising the impact they can have on people's lives, but surely if there's something that's going to keep you awake at night, it's got to be that catastrophic event in that kind of industry. And that sort of got me on a little bit of a journey of exploration and discovery about how odd this was. And it was a bit eye-opening, because then once you start going down that path in one area, you realise, oh, hang on, it's not limited to safety. If you go and start really picking apart the HR function in an organisation, it seems counterintuitive when the HR department is the HR department concerned about the human resources or protecting the organisation from the human resources? Is the environmental department concerned about protecting the environment or protecting the green credentials of the organisation? And none of that's meant to be critical or pejorative. Organisations have got to survive and respond and deal with the world where they find themselves. Organisations that get criticised for environmental damage often have reasonably good environmental credentials, but you have one issue and all of a sudden you're an environmental vandal. In the same way, if you're an organisation, you have one fatality, then you don't care about safety. And so there's a whole narrative that plays around it. But I was just really fascinated in the way these systems work and what they're designed to do.
Yeah, and then what I take away from that story that you just narrated is this, that I think you probably had one view about how risk should be managed in a big organization like that, but through your education, through your background, through your expectations. But as I understand it, what you felt in that moment was that how could something, maybe not trivial, but something as little as just hand injury could be the focus of somebody who's sitting at such a, in this position of power and authority. Am I?
Yeah, and it got even more surreal than that, because they bought a consultant. I can't remember the reason why they were bought in, and I just wonder if these things are connected. But they bought a consultant in from a US company, quite well known in the safety industry. Extraordinary rates they were paying. Looking at the invoice, you say that's just extraordinary. And I'm sure there were other findings that came out of this, but they came to one of the gas plants and did an inspection and review. And the finding that resonates with me the most, and I've never forgotten it, was a recommendation that somebody should dress up in an alligator suit, and he used the word alligator, and that stood out to me as well instead of crocodile. But anyway, alligator suit at the front entry to the facility, repeatedly going, "Snap, snap, mind your hands." I really felt like I was in a bad episode of Play School. And that really that has stuck with me for a long while. I think, oh my goodness.
And often the first experiences don't go away so quickly. Sometimes they have a very, very large imprint on who you are as a person. But so how has this experience shaped your understanding and your motivations as we move forward now that we are somewhere close to where you are in your career right now?
Well, I guess not long after that, and not long before I resigned, to be honest, but not long after that, I sat down with one of the executive vice presidents of the facility, because this had kind of blown me that we were spending all this time and money on it, and I really admired her and just wanted to test some ideas with her. And I think at the time it might have been 8 or 10 or 12, I can't remember, but she had an accountability for a reasonably large number of producing facilities. And I got the monthly health and safety reports from all of those facilities and put them on a desk in front of her, because she'd asked I'd asked her some questions, and she said, "What are you going on about, Greg?" I said, "Can I meet you?" And we picked a time. I had the reports laid out in front of her, and I said, "Here are all your monthly reports. In any of these, where is the evidence that you know your critical risks are being managed? Where is it?" And there was a bit of an oh moment from her as well. So, okay, it's not there. And you mentioned sort of my writing, but that kind of idea of how do you actually know what's going on sits a little bit at the heart of what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
And I see in your writings that hasn't changed so much in so many years now.
No, I don't think it has. I think we've invested and I obviously haven't seen everything and don't know everything that's going on, but I feel like when I say we, the risk and safety sort of industry has invested quite heavily in how to have better conversations, how to write better procedures that are more suitable for the front line. I'm not saying we're doing it well, but I think if we say what do we focus on, there's a lot of noise around that. More recently, psychologically safe workplaces and trust and that are really very, very prominent. But we still have a fundamental issue in understanding what it tells us and whether it works. And the measures, the traditional measures that we have, still don't answer those questions. So I think we've changed a lot of what we do at a micro level, at least. At a macro level, I still think it looks the same. We've tried to shift some of the underlying philosophies about why we do the things we do, but I'm not sure we are any better placed to understand if it tells us what we need to know.
And I think that sums up your motivation so well, because where you started off from, Greg, was that here's an organization that has lost sight of what risk really means by being so focused, so single-mindedly focused on hand injuries.
I'm curious if they'd lost sight of that, or if institutionally, so without wanting to pick on that organisation, but whether institutionally we ever understood that, because it strikes me as being so pervasive. The lack of attention to criticality seems to be really pervasive across most industries. So there's something deeper going on. I don't know what it is, but I think there's something deeper there.
And if you delve a little bit deeper, at a very personal level, why does it bother you so much? This disconnect between the critical risk and what we need to do about it. Why does it trouble you so much at a very deeper level?
Oh, I don't. It irritates me. I don't know if it troubles me. It irritates me. I find hypocritical is not even the right word. I probably don't even know the word for it, Nippin, but there's something disingenuine about investing so much time and effort and so much sort of public-facing rhetoric about concern for safety when we're just not doing the work to understand if our organisations are safe, I think. And it's not... I think I spent like the first 15 to 20 years of my career sort of sitting... I felt like I was sitting in a room going, am I the only one who sees this? Because I would look around and everybody's doing it. I think... And I really didn't want to say anything because I thought, I must be the idiot in the room. Whereas everybody is doing all of this stuff thinking it's telling them something. And I kind of got over that after a while, particularly as I got more experience and spent more time in courtrooms. And that's an interesting place because in courtrooms your opinions count and you have to say what you think and you have to back it up by evidence. And I thought, well, perhaps if I took some of that thinking and started taking my opinions and putting them out there and backing them up with the evidence behind it, we can perhaps shift the dial a little bit on those things.
Great, and I think that's a really nice ending to this episode, at least to this session. Getting to know you, your motivations, and why do you believe in what you believe in. And maybe we can stop here, unless you have something else to share.
That's fine. Thanks, Nippin.
Okay.